Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Tory minister and part-time clown Greg Hands is the latest Tory to insist that there is no chance of a May general election. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. So why are the Tories going over the top in denying a May general election? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So someone from the BBC said that a Tory MP told them that the only way there was going to be a May election is if Jeremy Hunt is held up as a modern day hero after his budget tomorrow and there's dancing on the streets about it. Then Greg Hands, the former Conservative Party chair and now a junior trade minister, has said that the election will not be taking place in May as well. Now, here's the thing. Rishi Sunak, the man who will actually decide, has not said that the autumn will be in autumn. He did say that his working assumption would be for an election in the second half of 2024, which, bear in mind, leaves the way open for July and doesn't automatically mean autumn. So why has Sunak not explicitly said that the election will not be in May when other Tory MPs are happy to do so? Is it because it's actually planned for May? But regardless of when they're planning the election, why go to such lengths to deny a May election, albeit lengths which Sunak has not engaged in himself, leaving it to others who don't ultimately make the decision and so can't be accused of lying when it ends up being a May election after all? Well, there could be a genuine reason why the Tories would want to go to these lengths to deny a May election, even if they are genuinely aiming for autumn. It's usual to have a general election in spring. They're almost always between April and June. To hold that at any other time, it's not just that it's unusual, it's actually rare. There have been 11 general elections in my lifetime, and only the last one in 2019 did not take place in spring. So although very young voters may not think there's anything remarkable about aiming for an autumn election, after all, the last one was in December, most voters who've gone through a few will know that it is actually really strange, and also that the Tories have not really come up with a good reason for doing so. When Rishi Sunak talked about an election in the second half of 2024, he justified it by saying he had things to get done. Well, what are they? Seriously, he's not actually doing anything, is he? I mean, there's the budget and the Rwanda bill, and then that's basically it. The budget is announced this week. Then that's done. The Rwanda bill, one way or the other, in the next few weeks, we're going to see whether it gets passed or gets stuck in the mud. So there's no reason to delay until autumn. What are the government even working on which cannot be completed before the summer? It's nothing. So this reasoning is nonsense. But if the Tories genuinely are aiming for an autumn election, it does actually make sense to lay it on thick about the election not being held in the spring. After all, if voters believe the election should take place in spring, and then it's not, the Tories look like cowards, like they're clinging onto power by their fingernails for no other reason than enjoying their perks for a few months more, which may not be that far from the truth. And then they may find they lose even more approval, and so suffer an even bigger loss in autumn. Not that they've got very much approval left to lose, but there is still some. Would you believe this? There's still 20% of people saying they're going to vote Conservative. So these over-the-top denials could be genuinely because they want the public to get used to the idea of the election being in autumn, because that is what they're aiming for. Or it could be that they're desperate for people to think that it's in autumn so that they can wrong-foot a whole load of people when they suddenly call for it in spring. Consider the benefit to the Tories in an unexpected spring election. First, if Labour are caught out, then their campaign won't be quite ready. The same applies to the SNP and Lib Dems as well, of course, who will be challenging the Tories in some key seats. Second, there are plenty of non-partisan anti-Tory campaigns gearing up for the election. Now, if they still think they've got another half a year to get ready, there's a danger that they panic when the election is called much sooner than they expect. Third, with the Conservatives particularly suffering from a lack of confidence amongst younger voters, hamstringing the student vote will be important for them. Now, spring is round about the time of end of year exams for a lot of students. So depending on exactly where it is, or when it is, sorry, you may have some students who are at university, and if they're registered to vote, they're grand. Some of them may have finished those exams and would have gone back home for the summer. So depending on when it is, some students may get caught out by either not registering where they're physically going to be or not sorting out the postal voting. After all, if they think the election is going to be autumn, I mean, they're certainly going to be in their student digs then. They could just register for there and it's all fine. To a lesser extent, the same thing applies with older voters who might be organising holidays for the spring, much less likely to go on holiday in autumn. Announcing a spring election unexpectedly increases the chances of the Tories' opponents being caught out and not organising themselves in time. Then consider the downsides of waiting until autumn. Hundreds of thousands more of their elderly voters will have died, as I've said recently. Even more hundreds of thousands of mortgage holders will have been presented with way higher repayments. News today, HSBC, they've just announced that their fixed rate mortgages are going up. So it's not even a case of hoping the rates fall. They will at some point, I suppose. At the moment, they're still going up. Retail figures are very up and down. I mean, January looks all right, then February looks really bad. So the economic news is going to continue to be one of stagnation. Inflation coming down some more will help a little, but not enough, because wages are still struggling, especially in the public sector. Whatever shiny tax cuts are announced in the budget will have worn off as people realise that actually they're still paying out more when they check their household and business finances. And autumn is just in general a time of year when the cost of living crisis really starts to bite, because it's when people have to start to think about when they put the heating on. You know, it's just a naturally more pessimistic time than spring, especially when people are struggling to make ends meet. It also gives more time for more hospitals and schools to fall down, for more of our naval battleships to crash into each other again. In terms of trying to make things awkward for Labour, it gives more time for things to die down in the Middle East. Polling already shows that Labour are not actually going to suffer any ill effects from lunacy in the Middle East for the general election. But whatever difficulties they do have suddenly become way less likely if the Tories wait another 8 months for the election. And you always have to come back to the reason being given for an autumn election. The idea that Sunak has things to do is a nonsense. He's not doing anything other than chasing his precious India trade deal. He's had another pop at that this month. But he's doing nothing in terms of domestic policy or legislation. There's nothing big going through Parliament. It's just all about the Rwanda bill. The reason given is always, well, you know, things may get better in autumn. What will get better in autumn? I've just described some of the things that which will get worse, and that wasn't even an exhaustive list. There are others as well where there's a bit more of an unknown about it. Food inflation, maybe, or food shortages caused by our new standards controls. We don't know yet what the impact of that will be. The standards controls were brought in a very light, but it's got to have some impact, and that impact will be negative. We may have more potential medicine shortages. You know, these are unknowns, but there's zero chance that it will lead to an improvement in something. It can only make things worse. You know, they may or may not be noticeable for people. There's nothing on the horizon which can really improve things for the Tories. I mean, you know, inflation comes down a bit. Okay, that helps. Maybe the interest rates start to come down by autumn, but the people who've already been caught, I mean, they've still got those higher repayments. There's really nothing. However, as to the point about all these denials of a May election, I would just point out a few things. First of all, denying a May election is not denying a spring election. Could be held in late April, perhaps. Or it could be held in May and those denying it will simply say, oh, well, I was told otherwise, but it wasn't actually up to me, which is true. The only one who decides isn't ruling anything in or out. Second, when Sunak talked about the second half of the year, everyone took that to mean autumn, but July is in the second half of the year. If Sunak wants to go through another round of bruising local and mayoral election results on May the 2nd, including the very high-profile London mayoral contest, if he wants to go through that before going to the polls in even worse shape, he can be my guest. Third, the polling looks absolutely terrible right now, granted. Yes, people will say Sunak was mad if he calls the election for May. He must be barking. But what will they say about him if he calls it in autumn and things are even worse then? That's right. They'll say, oh, well, you should have held it in May, shouldn't you? You know, when he was at least on course for being the third largest party in the Commons. But overall, these denials don't really tell us anything about the election timing. If they are aiming for a May election, they'd still want to deny it. If they are aiming for an autumn election, they'd still want to deny a May election. What we're getting is a lot of noise. All that matters in terms of election timing is not what the Tories are saying, but what they're doing. And what they're doing right now is finding themselves in a worse position in the polls with each passing month, and Tory rebels trying to drum up support to oust Sunak as soon as possible. These are not really the conditions which make waiting until autumn a sound strategy. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.